Hello, everyone. So today I have the pleasure of hosting Mr. Nasim Beg, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Rabel Consultancy. He has had an illustrious career spanning nearly 50 years in the financial services industry, and he is widely regarded as the father of the mutual fund industry in Pakistan. And I'm so glad that you're here with us today.
Thank you so much, and I'm absolutely honored so thought me fit for this wonderful series.
Thank you very much. This is obviously part of Akhund Forbes' Build It and They Will Come series, and it is our privilege to have you here. And today we'll be talking about obviously your career, but also a lot of other interesting thoughts and ideas that you have about bringing social equity to the lives of ordinary Pakistani people. And there's a lot to discuss there. You've written tremendously about this. You've written a lot about this. And we'll be going through all of that. And I do feel that you're in a way a social economist at heart. So I'm really looking forward to our discussion. But right at the outset, would you tell us about your early career and how you started in the financial services industry?
Okay, so very quickly, I qualified back in 1970, got my first job at an automobile company.
And you qualified as a chartered accountant?
As a chartered accountant. And this was prior to the nationalizations, etc. It was there once the nationalizations took place. I lasted a few years before getting a bit not so happy with the nationalized environment. So I had to have had an offer to go do some consultancy work in Dubai. These were early days, 1976. I went there, and then I somehow got introduced to the people who were setting up the Abu Dhabi Investment Company, which was the investment banking arm of what the sovereign wealth fund is. And I ended up joining that, spent about 5 years with them, then moved to the UK for about 3 years and within the financial services sector. And then finally I moved back to Pakistan in the mid-80s into the automobile industry again, 10 years there, and I was itching to get back into financial services. So I set up my own little consultancy business then. This was 95 or thereabouts. The markets became unfavorable. Meanwhile, there was National Investment Trust, NIT, which had gotten into trouble. There was a friend who had been appointed the chief executive and chairman there. He sort of convinced me to join him and help him turn it around, which is what I was able to do. I was there for just about 3 years. And that's when I got to know Mr. RFP, when we started talking, and he wanted to talk about setting up a mutual fund business. So that is how I ended up teaming up with him and setting up the mutual fund business for RFP, giving then simply a stockbroker. Reading that this is
late 90s.
Late 90s, but I teamed up with him in the year 2000.
Okay.
So that was when we got together and continue to be with that group. It's now 24 years.
24 years with the group.
Yeah, and we set up that business. At one stage, we felt that we needed a major bank to partner with, so we partnered with MCB. And later on, we felt that relative to the other businesses that were involved with, which is manufacturing, cement, auto, steel, real estate, wind power projects, all sorts of other things, that had become a small part of the portfolio of taking up too much of, albeit by then I was only on the board and vice chairman of it, but still taking up time. And then we sort of agreed with MCB management, sent our interest out of them last year.
Yes.
And I've now primarily involved in the consultancy, financial consultancy, and also business consultancy for the organizations, etc. And sort of working closely with our investment banking team, which is the leading So it's investment banking.
It is indeed. It is indeed. In fact,
That's in a nutshell where I am.
it is indeed. In fact, Alphabet Group was initially a financial services, well, primarily a financial services group, but then it has gone on to become one of the largest conglomerates in the country. And of course, they are in cement, steel, as you mentioned, fertilizer, infrastructure and energy to an extent as well.
Real estate.
And real estate are a very significant part of the conglomerate. And of course, and you mentioned investment banking, and Alphabet Limited is one of the leading premier investment banks in the country. And have become so over many years of hard work by the board team. And how have you seen the mutual fund industry sort of, it has stagnated a bit, hasn't it? Is that because of the regulatory environment? Is it because there wasn't enough take-up amongst the masses? Or is it a different reason?
I think there's a bit of a background to the overall Pakistan situation. When we compare ourselves to the other countries within the subcontinent, have had a savings rate of between 10 and 12% range over a period, while India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka are more than twice that. You see, so there's definitely something, I feel like, wrong with us that we don't save enough, and in fact we live on our money, and that's why we get into our foreign exchange trouble all the time.
Yes.
And so that's one background. Secondly, our stock exchange itself has at best a few 100,000 active members active in the market, people, client accounts. And just to give you a background, when I sort of joined NIT had about 50,000 investors. NIT's counterpart in India, Unit Trust of India, had 45 million.
45 million. And we have 50,000.
We had 50,000. Okay. So yeah, show me about 1/10 of India.
Yeah. But in terms of population, you're probably 1/8, 1/7.
But let's discount 1/10 even. So that should have been
4.5.
4.5 million.
Yes.
So it wasn't even 450,000.
Yeah.
It was only 50,000.
Why is that? So, can I take it back to when was NIT created? It was
Back in
the
1962. And Unit Trust of India in 1964.
So it was created after NIT, yet it went on to have 45.
And let me sort of give you back. And so see, when Pakistan was created, 30 days, our government decided to team up with the West, had and entered various pacts, the Qatar Pact, Centro, etc. Essentially, so it was like Turkey, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, us believers versus the non-believing communists.
Yeah.
That was the pact. So the US sent a lot of people here to help us set up institutions that would help a capitalist structure, a market-based economy. So we got that head start of getting all of that there. It's another matter that the capitalism, where it's done well, has sort of co-evolved with democracy, because you need checks and balances coming up from democracy. But I think it suited the US to have one strong man run the show who kind of go along with their thinking. Had it been political people, politicians, they could know what their sort of thinking would be, their may or may not agree with the US sort of policies, etc. There was a little bit of a history to it. When prior to the independence, back in 1937, the Brits had sort of decided to allow a self-government and the Indians, and the Congress came to power. Obviously, they were numbers the biggest. And when the Second World War broke out, the Congress leaders took a stance: this is not our war, we don't support it. So all of them ended up in jail. The Muslim weavers did not. Fact of history.
Yeah.
So clearly, there's a different mindset with our people.
We were differently aligned.
We were differently aligned, and there's a good reason, because the Congress was seeking independence from the British, but not only the British, they also saw the million landlords, and especially of what Pakistan is today, as Muslims with a stranglehold on everything. So they had also the clear policy of doing the way with some so-called zamindari.
And season.
Yeah, so for our lot, it was nice to team up with Mr. Jinnah to get the land holding. So our evolution is very different to that of India.
Yeah. But it's interesting. So what could we have done differently for institutions like NIT, for the mutual fund industry, to bring more people into the fray?
Okay, it means a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
And just to give you the example of India, they used the Indian Postal Service. So a postman was the investment agent for Unit Trust of India. He went to every village. In the old days, at least my generation remembers, that the postman was, for the village, your connection with civilization. He'd bring you letters, which he'd read to you.
Yes.
And he would write down the replies like he was there. He did money orders, remittances coming from family members, etc. about the money he was there. So while he was delivering your money,
Because he has given out the guy
for him to say, okay, why did you put this in the Unit Trust of India? And that's how they succeeded. By the had a lot of institutional structures, but we weren't pushed enough about the people from day one. I mean, so at the end of the day, there wasn't enough effort. And again, there were flawed policies at that stage, they thought they were doing the right thing. I mean, if you remember, there was the so-called license charge, which means the government was rationing foreign exchange to set up a sugar mill or a textile mill or whatever.
Even to import cars.
No, but apart from that, in setting up industry. So if you wanted to set up a sugar mill, you possibly be a lucky person, but it would be in this location, this capacity, we give you foreign exchange to import and shit, get set it out. So while they were doing that, they also thought that, okay, let's be pro people. So we forced all those companies to list and offer their shares. Now, the sponsors weren't really interested in the small savings of giving that money in. They weren't. There's one thing where you go raise money in the market and you need it, and therefore you tend to care for your investor. Yeah, it wasn't that. And then obviously we had a history of double books, keeping profits off the books, siphoning off. So both the taxman as well as the small shareholder will be deprived together. So that's one part of our history of why people didn't quite trust the listed entities, etc. And whatever. Second, we had a boom and bust thing in the equity market because of uncontrolled leverage structures. So a lot of people would lose money because of that. And we ever learn that you put money to the stock market of the market, you invest in that company, it's not in watching its price. Yes. And look at its earnings, its future potential, etc., and put it there. And there's enough data to show you trading doesn't work. You've got to take a long-term view, 10 years more. So that never evolved. Secondly, we, unlike India, where life insurance was a thing.
Yes.
Here it remains stunted.
Yes.
Now, whether it's our religious thing, that am I taking a bet against the ordained lifespan or whatever, but somehow we remain stunted. And also, we didn't really have meaningful pension funds. But most of whatever the pension funds were, they leave money in government bonds, we sit back. Then the government had national savings schemes, which meant that they had nice outlets like for these post offices or to sort of get money, keep it. So again, people were happy, government guaranteed, no market risk. Life is easy. In fact, our post office had savings schemes as well as life insurance and annuities. But there's not enough of an effort to push that, unlike, say, India. So at the end of the day, the number of participants who came to the stock market lost out. There was NIT and there was the Investment Corporation of Pakistan. But that was a well-run operation. It went out and signed up people, business executives, etc., for opening accounts, and they would allow you, so if you put in 10,000 rupees, that you could borrow 20,000 from them and take a position. But normally they encourage you to hold these stocks for a time, etc. So by the time it got disbanded, it had about 25,000 accounts. Now, which was much larger than any brokerage house today. So there's maybe a few exceptions, but it's something that some efforts were made, not really. And the brokerage, the industry here was making money when getting you to trade. See, as a broker, if you come and trade,
or buy and sell and make the commission.
If you buy and hold,
then you're not making.
There's always that tendency, and therefore there was this crying need of mutual funds, which RF could see, and that's how we teamed up and we set it up and brought it to the marketplace. I think we had reasonable amount of success, and so much so that there were 7 other houses that spoke to me, and I'd give them guidelines how to set up their own.
Yes.
So my view was, it's got to spread, and I can't do it on my own.
Of course.
And it's worked. That way it worked. But as to why it hasn't grown, I feel that apart from the compulsory listings, there was also another incentive given to people to list, was a tax difference between the tax rate of a listed company and an unlisted company.
Correct.
So when you start doing things for the wrong reason, you're not listing again because you need the money, but also you get a tax break. Similar things happened with the mutual fund industry. You somehow got tax arbitrage here there. So you become daisy. So that's
which is the other area.
So that's in a nutshell what has happened.
I see. And do you think, and this actually brings us to some of the other things we have to talk about, do you think it has something to do with the inequality of wealth distribution, income distribution and wealth distribution in Pakistan, which resulted in a lot of people being sort of left out of the capital markets?
So yes, very so, but as I said, that when Pakistan was created, that there was a major reason or cause was to protect that class divide.
Yeah.
Now that class structure,
The landed class.
the landed class, and that class structure has been around for centuries. Okay, it's not broken away. India had its landforms, it totally did away with. They don't have any absentee land, zero. Okay, there's nothing whatsoever. Again, Bangladesh evolved slightly differently. Unlike what we had out here, there were only 2 families that you might consider that were kind of land-holding families. Because East and West Bengal was split by the British in 1905. They were basically following famine, etc. There were problems, and administratively they split them. And so the eastern part was the more godforsaken marshland, etc. Poor people happened to be mostly Muslims. The West Bengal, most of the landlords, Hindu landlords in West Bengal. So once East Bengal became East Pakistan, there was no feudal standalone. So they too evolved without that. India, by deliberate measure, did away with the fuel stagger hold. We continue.
We continue.
So that's one pattern why there is inequality in the first place. Because when you sit there owning property,
And you accumulate
it's two things. It's an unearned income. Okay. So you don't have to push yourself, you don't do anything, you're not innovative, you sit there and let things go. And then it's become worse. Because in our civil and military service, the government thought we can't afford salaries, good salaries, etc. They started compensating the employees in terms of giving them parcels of land in one form or the other. So again, a lot of people have become wealthy by just sitting on that piece of property for doing nothing. I mean, I'm not saying it's right or wrong to compensate your employees, your equals.
Yeah.
But the mechanism used is a faulty one when it just causes more and more of that.
So we not only inherited a large rentier class, we actually added to it.
Yeah. And then one other thing. It's again because of our aligning ourselves with the US. We did not go out to earn our keep, so to speak. If you take 1947 to 71 election, Bangladesh separated, came independent. We had some June earnings, etc., etc. But there were only 2 years where our exports exceeded our imports. The rest of it was a negative. 72 onwards, till say last year, 52 years. By now, remittances have come in because in early 70s, the oil price increases, etc., created jobs, etc., in the Middle East, and so people started going out. So the remittances plus exports. Yeah. Remittances plus exports minus import, 46 years, we still have a negative. So all these years, we had dollar flows, unearned dollar flows, because we happened to be with a common cause with the US in the region. And if you chart out the US flows on a chart from the 50s onwards, there are three sort of humps. One is the EU era, one is the Shah era, and then one is the Musharraf era. So a lot of people say these guys had a wonderful economic performance.
But they had an inflow of dollars.
Inflow of dollars. And so we never learned to earn our dollars. We were able to get easy dollars. It's like a sports person having a wonderful run, but it's all steroids.
Yeah.
Once you remove the steroids, you've oh, my muscles don't work, this thing doesn't work. This is where we
now we have to work for a living.
and your muscles are not functional. So it's a struggle to then hand your thing. So that's the state of our economy. So it is causing. So what's happened is when on top of it you had these borrowed dollars, had you not borrowed dollars and let the exchange rate go to where it had to, like in the last year, when there were no dollars available, we saw the exchange rate take change. You have a rapid change.
It resulted in a fair amount of import substitution.
So, but that is one example. But before that, had we allowed this 10 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe the dollar rupee would have been 500 then, but we would have sorted ourselves out. So we did not. So the better off people have had the advantage of relatively cheaper cars, other luxuries, etc., than they ought to have. Or if I had decided I want to take out my earnings and I think that buy myself an apartment in Dubai or a house in the UK or whatever, I bought cheaper dollars than they ought to be. So it actually aggravated this problem. It's all at the cost of the person. And if you take bulk of your people live off agriculture, so you weren't paying the true rupee conversion value to them based on international prices. And then you take other things. I mean, take OGDC, they get a wellhead price based on the international oil or gas prices converted at the exchange rate. So had the exchange rate been defined, they would have a lot more earnings and they would have been drilling a lot more, etc. So we got in this entire vicious cycle.
Yes. But now and I want to talk about inflation now, because now every time the dollar goes up and the rupee loses value, there is reported inflation because there's a huge dependency on imports.
Yeah, that's the point. That we basically bought everything. We didn't learn to produce. We didn't have to earn our dollars. So we became inefficient. We didn't invest in people and equipment and any of that, which we ought to have done. And because of that, now that you try and run the economy at a reasonable growth rate, as soon as you do that, you import so much, but you're not exporting enough, or not earning enough dollars, even though you get remittances, albeit these are able-bodied people who are adding to productivity elsewhere. We just get a little bit of money from them. They're not adding to our productivity. So and that money comes in and also is essentially creating a consumer demand amongst their families. Rightfully so. But the point is, all of it we then depend on imports. So we have caught up in this. We've got up this vicious sort of cycle, and unless we first say, okay, we need to have a market-driven exchange rate, which means without borrowing dollars. So if it goes to 500, 600, so be it. And you look after people through other means, through direct transfers. Now, there's a little bit of that being done through this Benazir support.
Yes.
But it's a pittance. And when you try and do a means-tested distribution, there is fraud, there's misuse, there's all sorts of things that happen. Albeit it's the spirit behind it might be right, but it can't be done. And then the rupee amount is a bit of a lottery. Let me put it differently. If one is entitled to invest money in boot savings, which means for retired people or widows, etc., you're allowed 5 billion, 50 lakhs per person. Roughly you earn 2% per annum more than the market rate on that. It's a percent pocket money being given. 150 lakhs, it roughly works out to 10,000 a month. And the Benazir income support person who's never seen 1 lakh get 50 is getting 3,000 a month.
Yeah.
So where's the equity? We just do these things. And then everything is skewed. I mean, if I'm a government employee and I get a piece of land at a subsidized price, fair enough. I mean, not paid enough, so I'm being paid that way. But effectively, what's happening in the national budget, the subsidy doesn't get recorded as a subsidy. In fact, let's say if the plot is worth 10 million rupees, and they charge me 500,000. 500,000 is government revenue.
It's not, they're not recording it as an outflow.
So that's the problem that we have. Accounting that doesn't take account of the true picture of what we are, what we do, and we keep just making it worse. That's right. So as I said, the idea is to let the market forces force us to cut back on our imports, force us to start producing out here. Now it can't happen overnight. We take a while. So meanwhile, the poor people get further clobbered.
Yes.
And the only way out is to give out the basic income. So universal basic income versus the Benazir against support program. When you try and do targeted delivery, where you first do means testing and then you deliver, there's just too many discrepancies. If you were to give out money directly each adult, and there's based on the CNIC, and now we've actually come far ahead when compared to when the various income programs started out in terms of electronic banking facilities, wallets, etc., and some very good recent moves by the central bank in terms of last, etc. They're excellent. So we can now start planning, delivering money directly to every adult. And what the amount ought to be, there could be various thoughts about it, etc. My own sort of gut feel is that if we think the minimum wage is 36,000, then give 18,000 to everyone, which would mean a family with a man and woman have done, they'll effectively get the 36. Some will say that no, it'll make them lazy, etc., etc. They won't strive for buying more. Albeit this has been tried across the board in developed and undeveloped economies. And none of those fears that people think that, first of all, it's the people say, oh, you can't give charity. It's not a matter of charity. It's not like you have charity is when it's not your right. And if every adult citizen has a right, then it's not a charity. That's going on. Secondly, people will come out with these wise ones and teach a person how to fish rather than give him fish. It's all very nice to say that, but because of the way our economy is structured, we do not create enough jobs. So even if a person is seeking to go out and work, earn a living, honorable living, there is no work. So it's very nice lecturing him, but this is not going to work. So you've got to start. At the end of the day, what is an economy? And let me say, I'm not an economist. You said social economist. No, I'm not an economist. But
I said at heart you are.
At heart, yes. So my view is very simple. At the end of the day, the economy is about money flows. The economy generates a certain amount of money. How does it get distributed? To few at the top, very little at the bottom, and that's where we are.
I'd like to read something because you referred to Piketty in your writing, so I'd like to read something from this chapter. He says, for this half of the population, the very notion, this is the masses. I think the country he's writing about is half, in our country is a bit more. For this half of the population, the very notions of wealth and capital are relatively abstract. For millions of people, wealth amounts to little more than a few weeks' wages in a checking account or low-interest savings account, a car, and a few pieces of furniture. The inescapable reality is this: wealth is so concentrated that a large segment of society is virtually unaware of its existence. So there are some people who imagine that it belongs to some surreal or mysterious entity.
So he's writing about France.
Correct, yes.
Clearly out here it's far more stark. So they had their revolution, they had a change in societal structures. We've not had it. We continue with the age-old structures. And we've created more over time rather than try and eliminate it. I mean, I'm not saying it's been a deliberate thing. It's just the way it's where we are about, but that's where we are.
And the UBI, Universal Good Standard, it's not a safety, right? It's not a bill. It's a basic standard.
Okay, and let me put it this way. Let's say if you take the poorest district somewhere in Pakistan where there's hardly an economic activity. If every adult man and woman were to receive, say, again, the number I was suggesting, say 5,000 a month, they will go out and spend it on their kids, food, on clothing. First thing they'll want to do is on teaching, on kids getting taught. So some person out there who's had a little bit of education will become a teacher. Another person who's got even half a doctor, they say leukemia is not good, leukemia is not good, but forget that. Let him become a compounder, offer some basic medical supplies, etc. out there. Someone will run a little Suzuki between village and the town. All that economic activity will start taking place. So as I said earlier, and the economy is about money flows. Our problem is that there is not enough money flowing to the bottom of the pyramid. So this is one direct way of dealing. I mean, you go all the other nice things that we've tried doing for the last 76 years, and the trickle down doesn't work.
We haven't.
It hasn't worked.
It hasn't.
So let's get that and let's just focus on and let the exchange rate do whatever it has to, because this is inflation linked, the minimum wage or the basic income. So you keep adjusting it. So they'll keep getting, those who retire younger, they'll get by and they'll continue with some economic activities. That is what will create productivity, economic activity. People will start doing things, someone will start producing something, etc., to satisfy that demand that's created. And that is the only way you'll get your economy going. That's not the way we've tried it all these years.
And there is a feminist argument to this, isn't there? Because
Clearly. I mean,
if you give the money to the female in the household, or at least if there's a universal basic income, then all that money gets spent first on children's education and children's nutrition.
But not only that. I mean, the way to deal with the fact that the rights of women in Pakistan, there are issues with it. I mean, albeit even though there might be religious edicts supporting rights, but in practice we have a problem. So once a woman has money in her own pocket or her bag, she has a degree of confidence in herself.
And autonomy.
And autonomy. So not only that, and then it's not just women. I mean, take some of the people who, we say we are Muslims and we don't have a caste system. There are people who are born into certain families which are considered fit only for janitorial services out here. They can't break out of it. Okay, they're just stuck.
Yes.
So you give them that. Who wants to go into a sewer and earn a living? I mean, it's horrible. But there's no choice for those people. So when as I said, it's very easy to give lectures that why do people work, etc., etc. We don't give opportunities. Some of the people in some parts of the country live in near serfdom.
Absolutely.
So if a serf or a slave works doubly hard,
he can't
or she will not get any extra income for it.
And we do have problems with bonded labor.
Yeah. So you're born into it.
Yeah.
You're born, and all these brick-kiln workers, they're born into debt.
Yes.
And they'll never get out of it.
And they'll never get out.
And no matter how you come and try and teach economics taught in the US, practice in the US, etc., see, people tend to forget that we are at least 100, if not 200 years away from America in terms of evolution of society. So there's a whole degree of things. And so what applies there, you cannot hope it'll apply here. Another very sort of telling observation by Banerjee and Duffalo, the couple who got the Nobel Peace Prize recently, and they've been working in such countries throughout, and that's what they've got there. So they sort of figured out that the reduction in birth rate follows improvement in your economic situation, not the other way around. Where out here we think, how can they do well when they've got so many kids? No, it's the other way. You make them well off, and they'll stop having those kids. So when a woman is well off and she'll stop having so many kids. And you've seen that in Bangladesh.
Absolutely.
The woman's got a job and she's stopped having those many kids.
And they're getting married a little bit later because
all of that. So what I'm saying is there are some flawed ideas we have. Everyone likes to quote, etc., etc. But no one really thinks about the basics, the fundamentals.
So, but how do you fund all of this? Because you've written here, you've written this. Should the collective wisdom demand and I know we're going to go into how the state funds it, but should the collective wisdom demand a similar amount of fiat money as that created by lending can be created by the state to provide the investment capital? How does the state fund universal basic?
Let me put it this way. If we take the last 5 years, the total new money creation that came to the system is about 17 trillion rupees, of which some got reduced because we were running down our foreign exchange reserves. So there's an equivalent reduction in Pakistan rupees in circulation in technical terms. So around 15 trillion. Now, the way money is now currently created, new money, is by new money created by the central bank to fulfill a bank's lending.
Yes.
So a commercial bank buys a government bond or lends to the government. That's as soon as it lends it or buys a bond, that's much of new money that's created effectively in the system and goes to the government and spends and comes into the system, back into the banking system. So it grows. And because you have what is called fractional reserve banking, what happens is that I'll just say roughly 10%. So if a bank gets a deposit of ₹1 million, 10%, 100,000, it needs to deposit with the central bank where it just remains blocked. The rest, it can create new money for, it can lend. So when a bank lends money, say to you for buying a car and you'll pay it over 5 years, they're not blocking my deposit for 5 years. Okay? It doesn't work that way. They create new money by lending you the money, and since they are allowed that as once they put in the reserve ratio, the central bank will honor their check, new money will be created, you'll get your car, and then that'll go to the auto company and ultimately come back to as deposit to some bank, and it'll start that process again. So 10% off, the rest goes back into. So this is how money is created in the modern day.
Yeah.
There's one other way, that if there were foreign loans that government takes, those come in as dollars or whatever, other than IMF, that stays as dollars. The rest, like from the Asian Development Bank, etc., they come. The central bank keeps the dollars, gives the Pakistan government equivalent rupees. It prints them.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's also money creation. So this way, the government of Pakistan effectively got about 80% of the new money creation. Okay, and only 21% went to the private sector for new borrowing, etc., in the last 5 years. On top of that, during the 5 years, what the government borrows over and above the 26 trillion rupees it recovered in taxes from people, or from businesses, whatever way, indirect taxes, whichever way. Bulk of it is indirect tax, which means every poor person pays towards that as well. But nevertheless, so 26 plus 17 or so, they had 43 trillion rupees to spend. Of that, in their spending, 19 trillion was interest they paid to the banks on the borrowing.
On the money that, even though they are the creator of fiat currency.
Yeah. So really the system needs to be rethought. I mean, why do we say printing money is inflationary? Because more money comes in, so same large amount is chasing more goods or chasing more dollars. So the exchange rate takes a knock. So it's essentially the same thing, too much money chasing that. But if the government didn't borrow, printed the money, but made sure that the banking system through this fractional reserve cannot create that new money equivalent, you'd have an arrangement where it's the same amount of money available to the government, except this time the banks aren't getting richer. I mean, if you look at the last 5 years, our banks have done wonderfully well, okay, for basically doing nothing, sitting on government paper.
Yes.
Very small, I mean, as I said, 80 versus 20, and if you take off the entirety, so roughly government spending is not productive. Some of it is necessary. You need defense forces, you need civil administration, you need some infrastructure. Infrastructure will help you become more productive perhaps later, but it is not productive per se.
Yeah.
So the unproductive side of the economy, which is taking this money, the large chunk of it, should I call it the parasite, is maybe 5 times the size of the host.
Yes.
How long can this last?
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, as simple as that. Now, this is obviously not economics that economists will do, will foo-foo me down and say, he's talking through his hat, etc. These are hard facts that need to be addressed. And there is a fair amount of number of economists worldwide who are now talking about these things. So I've only read them and talking about them. I'm not the inventor of this thought. I'm merely having read them, understood that, okay, this is
makes
something
sense.
Makes sense. So effectively...
And you have an objection to fractional reserve banking from the perspective of property rights as well, right? Because
it does everything else.
Yeah.
See, because when money is created out of money,
or rather the transfer of my money or my property to the bank, which then the bank treats as its own with a debt created to the customer.
Let me put it this way. We go back to the history of banking, the time of, say, the year 1500, the Medicis. They're the ones who started using double entry bookkeeping. So what it meant was that prior to that, the idea was that if you went and deposited your gold with the banker or gold coins or whatever, they held that in trust. Okay, so it was their liability to you. Then once they started doing this, they said, okay, this is my liability, it's no longer in trust, and what I do with the money is my asset.
Yes.
Okay, so they started building assets, and how do they do that? They realized that all the money deposited with us, no one's turning up to draw it immediately. So some of it, so basically initial stage, you deposit some gold here, they'd give you a nice piece of paper saying you are worth so much, and you go to another town, be able to trade based on their name, that he's good for X number of dirhams, dinars, whatever else. And so their paper became like paper currency. But then they realized we can issue a little more than we've actually have on deposit, because all of it is not coming back. So they started issuing, okay, let me keep some reserve, but...
And lend out more than I have.
Issue more paper.
Issue more paper than I have.
Okay.
Yes.
So they weren't lending out, they're just giving, and then it's circulating and everyone's accepting it. So that's money creation in the early days through fractional reserve banking. It's just grown.
Yeah.
It's grown over time. Many banks failed then. So the governments stepped in and started forming central banks and said, okay, now each bank will not issue its own currency note. The central bank will issue it on behalf of the government of the state. So while banks are creating money, but the responsibility for that money is with the state.
Yes.
Not even with the bank.
Yes, not because the state underwrites it, essentially.
And that very same currency note it underwrites is going and borrowing from the bank and paying the bank interest.
Correct.
So when theoretically, when you pay back the money and interest, since money is created by lending, and now if I get the loan back as a banker, I'll reduce that much money supply.
Yes.
But when I want some interest as well, some more money supply would be reduced. So actually, it would start stifling the economy. So I'm on a perpetual thing of having to grow my lending. Otherwise, the economy.
You can't support
so
it.
that is why the world is into this perpetual growth model, which is then helping effectively denude the earth. And so we leave our kids with debt and a denuded earth.
Absolutely.
That's what we are headed for.
But how do you transition from the current system to a new system without fractional reserve banking, where the government doesn't do borrowing, instead it actually issues
There's
the fiat
various
currency?
ways. I mean, there's no tried and tested because I'm the one who's trying to push for it, having read a lot of people, but it's actually not being practiced anywhere. So anything you do will be trial and error. Now, one way could be that the government doesn't borrow from banks. And so if right now the reserve ratio is actually 6.5% cash reserve, let's say rough account, you make it 70%. So the banks, of all the money that comes in, have to leave 70% with the central bank not earning anything on it. So only on the 30, and unless they start lending to the private sector, et cetera, and increase that they learn from.
Yes.
So
so you're okay with fractional reserve banking for the private sector?
What I'm saying is you can start the transition that way. At the end of the day, it will create more money in the system as long as there's some fraction more than that you can lend.
But less profits for the banks.
Less profits, but also at the end of the day, it spurs a growth rate which then is maybe a cause of our climate issues, et cetera. So it's too big a thing to try and summarize in one solution.
Fair enough.
All I'm saying is these are so if the government were, and again, not do it overnight and kill the banks, but gradually start doing that. And see, like when IMF gives us dollars, those are immunized. Those don't get converted into rupees. So they don't add to our money supply. So it's a similar thing. If the government is borrowing, it doesn't get converted into deposits. It just comes into the system, but that much is taken out and kept at the central bank.
Understood.
So that way, of course, I mean, the quantum I've just mentioned that the government is taking away, if the parasite continues doing that, then you've had it. But in these very numbers, if 19 trillion wasn't there and paid back in interest, the spending from 43 trillion would not come down to 24 trillion. So clearly there's a huge advantage in terms of reducing the parasite's role simply by doing that.
And our national debt is a problem, right? We have our international debt, our domestic debt. And I'd like to talk about something. So in the early 20th century in Europe, because of the two world wars, because of high inflation, there was a fair amount of redistribution of wealth, right? What you've suggested, universal basic income, funding it through changes to the fractional reserve banking, all of those things, they will spur economic growth, they will improve lives, but they don't really address the inequities in the society.
Well, to an extent,
to an extent they do.
I mean, when you start getting spending money, whether you're a woman or a wrong caste or whatever, you are better off.
Yes, they do.
But the issue is that.
But the redistribution of wealth, to a large extent, it doesn't take place.
Piketty, of course, has recommended wealth tax.
That's right. I wanted to come to this.
So
what's your view on that?
I think to begin with, because everyone is into non-productive hoarding of real estate, that needs to be taxed. Because right now, you just hold it. If you hold it for more than 6 years, there's no tax on your capital gain either. Which is wonderful. I mean, all you have to do is hold it, do nothing, and become wealthier. And because the government, the way it's being run, is creating more money supply in the system than the system can support, the land values, etc., will go up. The poor people who are landless will remain where they are. So the inequality continues to grow.
Exactly.
Okay, so my asset value, my house, everything comes worth more, and then if I sell it off, I'll maybe be able to get some nice dollars and take it abroad or do whatever. So that's what a lot of us do, and that is to think about. I mean, is that a fair economy? I think most of us are driven by, let me have some assets and a right of abode elsewhere, because back of my mind, I'm saying we are heading for a failed state, and I'm adding to its problems by doing exactly what is making it worse. So how do we change that mindset? It'll only change if there is more hope amongst the masses, and their demand creates more need for industry, for productivity. Everyone then because anyone who's producing anything will also benefit as the consumption basket increases out here, which currently is minimal.
But what I wanted to propose was a domestic debt restructuring. Right down, right? Because if we're going to go to right now, Pakistan's got huge international debt, right? I think nearly about over $100 billion.
So there are two ways of it.
If we renegotiated with them, I think the moral hazard argument is going to be you need to renegotiate your domestic debt.
Sure. So one way is don't create more domestic debt by see, right now what happens is, and the state bank is struggling, etc., in the sense that what do you do with interest rates because of inflation?
Yes.
But look at this way. If the government goes out and borrows at, say, 20%, so it borrows $1 million, a year later it has to pay back another 200,000, okay? And since it doesn't have enough money, it'll borrow that 200,000. So there's no new money created in the system. So the higher the interest rate, the higher the money creation, the higher the inflation.
Unless
so
the tax collection goes up.
Yes, but the point is, tax collection, everyone says, take up the tax collection. My point is, yes, I'd like to see a change in the tax structure. In other words, more of direct taxes on whether the higher earners or the properties, etc. Or as I said, high earners, any from whatever source, or those sitting on assets and non-productive real estate, taxing them, and reduce the indirect taxes. Right now, the indirect taxes in our total tax collection bill is around 80%.
Hugely
so it's all a burden on the poor people. So you need to change that mix. So collecting more tax simply and feeding the parasite further is not the answer. That too needs to be addressed. And if I can, out of the 43 trillion, take away 19 trillion, that's a huge savings. You don't need to tax more. You don't need to borrow more. You are actually running a surplus.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not saying it can be done overnight, but you can have a target. Okay, this is where we're going to go. So meanwhile, do we want to restructure? You will probably have to simply to save these cash flows, because each time the government has to pay money, return some of a part of the loan, or pay interest, it needs to borrow more money.
Which means that all the people who have been sort of investing in savings, national saving bonds, etc., they also take a haircut.
I'm not necessarily for that. I see it differently. I'm now a poor person who's put money in national savings. You want that poor person to take a haircut?
I'm saying, how would that
Certainly
happen?
not. Okay. So what you do is, for the major debt, which is the banks, etc., if it's a 5-year bond, say, okay, now it's a 10-year bond, and the interest you're supposed to
reprofile the debt,
and the interest you're supposed to get every year, we're going to get half of it now and half later. Work out the arithmetic of it so their present value doesn't get hurt, and they're actually not. But you buy more time, because government accounting is not like the accounting we are used to. It is money flows and money inflow and outflow. That's government budgeting. So if you can delay outflows by this reprofiling, that means that much outflow is reduced, so your deficit reduces, your
Yes.
need to, so you can start servicing your debt better. No haircuts. Don't be unfair to people. That's not the idea. I mean, so just reprofile, as you said it, to a longer period.
Different maturities, which is what we're trying to do. with-
But you can't hit the poor
Yeah.
people who are dependent on that for their, kitchen.
Of course, yeah. Because they rely
expenses.
upon that for their daily.
They-
the
they
pensioners,
have- they have
etc.
nothing
They
else.
have nothing else. Yes.
So you've got to do it sensibly.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you start moving away from fractional reserve banking, not overnight or,
Yes.
in a structured manner, you could actually bring in major changes
Exactly.
without having to. You would actually have a surplus. You have enough taxes. Now reprofile the taxes in the 70-20 ratio needs to reverse. Then you're doing all right.
Yes.
So that's, I would say, the best way to target. Now, exact details, yeah, it is for the economists to work out. There'll be many repercussions. You don't just take one action. This is a
course.
whole series of, these are just thoughts that one ought to be talking about. These are not
These are not
solutions.
absolutes, yeah.
These are not solutions that, do this and we, that's not it is intended to start a conversation. That's all. I mean,
But Mr. Beg, are we having those conversations? And in Pakistan today, and you were, and I should mention this as well. I think not. I don't know how. I think people do know about this, but you were at one point tipped to be a finance minister.
True.
And so, is Pakistan today having these conversations?
Okay, first of all, I was the wrong person for being tipped. And I'll tell you why. I firmly believe you need economists who understand things. I mean, I've just read a little, I'm not an economist. I don't think people like me should be finance ministers. Yes, people like me should be a part of a think tank pushing in the right direction.
Starting conversations.
And that, I think, the Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, under the governorship of Dr. Nadim Haq, is doing a wonderful job. There are a lot of conversations going on. Some of my articles have actually been published there. I have conversations, so at least, and that's primarily economists, and they can at least they're talking about such things.
But are they talking about it in government circles? Or are we sort of fighting existential battles?
I think the government circles would be a wrong forum. Okay. It's got to be academics like at PIDE, etc., or universities, etc.
Then how does the transition come about?
See,
from
a government servant, governments are essentially civil servants who've been trained to run a store. They kind of do a status quo type structure. They can't take revolutionary steps. They're not supposed to be revolutionaries. Okay? These are politicians who are supposed to be
That's what I mean. When I say the government, I meant the politicians.
And yes, you have somewhere you started Benazir income support program. Someone thought of it. We actually took the lead in this part of the world in that. So yes, there are thinkers within these political parties. However weak they might be, they're not. They have a lot to be desired out of the political parties. Most of them do not really have full-time think tanks trying to figure out what to do. Each time a party comes into government, they start figuring, oh, we didn't realize things were this bad, that was bad. And then they're just fighting fires. None of them come with a planned structure. Zulfikar Bhutto did. He had some wonderful support that we'll nationalize, we'll do this. We may disagree with hindsight as to how it was done, etc.
But there was thought and planning.
There was a planned. Since then, one has really not seen that. So it's the political parties that need to get their acts together in a better way. Some work is done. I'm not saying it's zero. I mean, there's certainly the Benazir income support program in the previous government. Dr.
SARS program,
Nishtar's
yes.
way of handling it,
Yes.
things like that. I mean, SARS was a continuation of that, but meaning there was a dedication towards
Of course.
that. So that needs to be a lot more of a conversation taking place. So rather than on television talking about, you know, that party did this, we did that in the past, talk of what you're going to do in the future and send out your reps who will talk of something constructive of what Pakistan needs, rather than just the negativity about each other and patting yourself on the back that we did this the last time round. That's what currently happens. So we need to improve that dialogue and get. So once the political parties get seized with it, etc., we've seen things like, you know, there's been the health card, etc. There are things like that. Okay, there are when you run a program like that, you find that there are some flaws. It doesn't mean you disband it. It means you improve it.
Yes.
Even Benazir support program has issues. You improve it. Ideally, replace it by universal basic income. That's the real way forward.
That's the real way.
But yes, there is some work happening. It's not like it's zero. But a lot more is needed, as I see it.
And one of those things is getting rid of untargeted subsidies as well, right?
Automatically.
Yes.
Because see, you subsidize, as I said, the Behbood program.
Yes.
You don't even know that it's not recorded as a subsidy. It's just interest expense of the government higher than some of the other, but it's not recorded as a subsidy. The land that's dished out is not recorded as a subsidy, or a tax break that someone's given is not recorded as a subsidy. It's just lower tax collection. So a lot of this stuff, you know, you run these utility stores departments. You can imagine the amount of abuse and the poor quality that will be delivered there. What if people just had money in their pockets, then they could buy from the market whatever they want to and not have these utility stores? You know, let people decide where they want to spend that money. And again, too much of micromanaging, that we'll give this for schooling, this for health. Yes, health insurance is one thing, but the rest, put people's money in people's pockets, let them decide what they need for their families. You don't try and be the big daddy trying to decide everything for them. That's the wrong way. That's the controlled economy way, like Russia, that, you know.
Because you've written here, it's something quite which sort of stayed with me, that governments are usually quite incompetent at regulating economies, but they can be very good at writing checks, right? Which is.
See, the point is, when you are running a government, and that's why I take the extreme example of communist Russia, where it was said that someone in Moscow would decide which driver will drive that truck from point A to point B in Tashkent, for example. Okay, when you micromanage what you can eat, what you can buy, what you can, you know, it just causes inefficiency. The one tried and tested mechanism humankind has evolved with is price discovery. Meaning, if there is a demand for something, all of us will get together and try and supply it. And the prices go up, so we start supplying it. Once the supply gets overdone, the price takes a knock. So there's a market mechanism. That's the best way. So you don't want to do away with the market mechanism. With money in your pocket, you will decide. So there'll be a price mechanism. And one thing else, where people again go wrong, is trying a minimum wage, etc. Now, in a country where there are hardly any jobs being created, you can have a minimum wage. Who's going to enforce it? If I hire a guard through a contractor, and the contractor pays him half the minimum wage, big deal. I might be a big corporation, very compliant, but the contractor isn't. or everyone says child labor is wrong, bad, the kid needs to be in school, but the child is working because he's trying to help the family make ends meet. So in that society, when you bring in nice things, minimum wage, is that, and feel good about it, there's very little real impact.
And universal basic income can actually have that.
People in the countryside don't. I mean, it's only registered organizations which will have a minimum wage. Average person
They won't.
Doesn't. So there's. So that's what I'm saying. That we tend to think that apply market to labor as well. Labor is different. I mean, you're a part of a family. You're living in a particular area. If there are no jobs there, you don't have the freedom to get up and go elsewhere and know where the other job is. I'll go work there. It's very difficult for you to move. And then there are barriers for you to move, let alone that there's a barrier against immigration in the developed world. When we had internally displaced persons, most provinces didn't welcome those poor internally displaced persons. So we are that terrible. And then we want to have the pretense of all the nice things we've created in the West, applicable to their economies, where there's near full employment, you can bring in a lot of things. Here, when there's near serfdom, we try and apply that, it cannot work. And that's why I say the basic income has to be universal.
I understand. And Mr. Beg, so you are as old or almost as old as the country, right? If you don't mind my saying that.
No, I am. I'm born a few days after Pakistan came to be.
Where do you see the country heading? And so where would you like to see it head? And how do we get there?
Okay, I think if we try and look at the brighter side of things as well, look at the recent vote. It's the youth which came out and said, irrespective of what these old people are saying is right or wrong, or who's good or who's bad, we are here to vote. Okay? The youth has spoken. I think that's your greatest hope. Your greatest hope is they are young and alive and kicking. And that's what will fix the country, not old people like me. I can have ideas, thoughts, etc. Yes, a few gray hairs helps you. You have hindsight that one could have done this, one could have done that. But really, it's for the youth to take us forward, and I think they are already on that path. There are a lot of young people working in the gig economy on technology things. Yes. People from villages earning up to $500 a month, selling some thing abroad, etc. So it's to me that's your hope.
And that is how. And that
as long as we, the oldies, don't keep them down,
and we keep supporting them, right?
And right now we don't support them.
Right now
we keep them down.
Yeah, but that has to change.
That too is a cultural thing, by the way. Kid is supposed to just politely obey the elders. And we think it's our right to be treated like that, and the kids are supposed to behave this way. That needs to break.
Yeah, and it is breaking. And do we have enough time? That's my question.
I look at it differently. History of humankind. Take the very broad picture. So, from all studies that we know, humankind emerged out of Africa and spread the world over. Okay, so immigration is a constant process. You move on. Okay, you're not tied to the earth. I mean, yes, as a landlord, I want my Haris tied. I don't want them moving out. Which is exactly what happened in the UK. It's the industrial age that started setting in and gave the average serf an opportunity to go elsewhere and work. But okay, the other side was that these people who were giving an opportunity were, okay, but as a serf you earned nothing, so you got paid a pittance. It was still better and a bit of freedom feeling, but you were living in congested, dirty environment, and you had the plague. So the plague knocked off 1/3 of the population, and all of a sudden these people had bargaining power.
Yeah.
So how rights evolve is different. The wars you mentioned, I think if you look at the civil rights movement in the US in the early 1950s, is a direct result of the Second World War, where a black and a white were together in a trench and realized that, we are brothers, comrades in arms. So that mindset broke out, and then you saw the evolution of the things in history of a society can alter the course. We are still stuck on the old course, and I'm just hopeful with technology and the youth, etc. Somehow they'll break free of the stranglehold of the haves, so to speak.
Thank you very much. This has been a wonderful conversation and very enlightening. And I'm so grateful for your time.
Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye.